Right, okay, so I guess the purpose of what we're going to talk to you about today is to talk about a big piece of work we did earlier this year on how we can best support your capability and the capability of your tertiary provider, tertiary organisation, to support adults with literacy and numeracy needs, and share with you, I guess, based on those findings, what we're planning to do next. And so it's telling you what we found out and where we plan to go. And our focus for the rest of the year, our main focus is on, on that capability question, because we know that is one of the, really important influences on learners. And I guess the other main point we'd make with this issue of capability is that, you are all great teachers already. And so what we want to do at TEC is to actually better support you so you can add to your skill set and your kete, so you can add to your strengths, so you can focus on building those. So you can achieve, to use, I guess, government language, best outcomes for Māori and Pacifica learners. That's where we're trying to come from with this. It's not about a deficit model. We're trying to, as much as we can, focus on strengths and actually expand those strengths. And that's partly why with the final session yesterday, we asked those questions about, what are your main impressions of day one, and also what sort of good practice can be scaled up, because we want to ensure more people benefit from the good things that we've heard about and things that you know about as well. So in terms of yesterday, so again, thank you for all the notes that we did type up all yesterday. So what I'm going to do is just summarize the main themes of what you said. So firstly, in terms of your main impressions of yesterday, so really, really positive feedback. And again, thank you for putting those down in writing, because that's really helpful for the Haitanga Waka team to know about how they've gone with the Wānanga Fono. So a few key things when we went through these notes last night, a few things sort of jumped out in terms of day one. One was the porphyry, and that quote was a really good summary of, I guess, what many people had said in their notes, that it was really exemplar of bicultural excellence. It was very welcoming, and it set the right tone for the rest of the day. That was very welcoming, so not just the porphyry, but also the general tone of the day. So again, well done to everyone here who's contributed to that. The two daemons who presented, that was definitely a highlight in terms of the history of Pacifica literacy, and also a daemon Witten about how to reach learners, how to really focus on numeracy and change attitudes there. So again, that was a big theme in terms of the keynotes. Pale, two keywords that came out, rawness and legacy, in terms of what you said yesterday, so thank you, Pale. And then two last quotes about the overall day, a good balance of sitting, listening and doing. So yes, we had a good range of things we were doing. So that's always good for a conference. You don't always want to be talked at. And I'm sure we've all had too many experiences of that. And again, quite a lot of commendation about the workshops and contents. And that's kind of what you said about yesterday. What kind of good practice could be scaled up? So again, a big pile of notes that we went through, and again, some really interesting themes that came out, some of which I guess it gives us a TEC food for thought, and that's why we asked this question, because it helps us think about what we might do next if possible. So what are some of the themes? So obviously culture of the learners, and that was building off the theme of the way to connect to learners is to draw on what they already bring to the classroom. And I think at least for when we helped work with Ako and Literacy Aotearoa to start off the Haitanga Waka program, that was one of the key themes that came through in terms of what do teachers need to do. Some of it sounds obvious, but it clearly isn't obvious for all teachers. There was also, let's have a look, this notion of we need to tell more stories of what is working and what has been successful. So clearly that suggests there is a gap in what's available online right now or what you can access. So we definitely hear you on that, to show you what works in success so that you and your colleagues can take on the lessons of others. whānau literacy. So the point there in some of the notes was you don't just need to focus on the individual person, but if you get the people they care for around them, that helps the learning. The other thing actually we'll say with here is part of the reason why we thought this exercise to report back the next day was a good one was because of a really excellent idea that Bronwyn Elsie did for the Wānanga Fono last year. So she did a similar exercise and presented all the findings back. So thank you, Bronwyn, for starting a really good idea and bringing it back. Because again, we're trying to think about what we can do here. It's a question of how to do these things. Financial capability, so obviously building off what Pale talked about, but also for us at TEC, we've started work with the Commission of Financial Capability. That's the agency in government that tries to provide workshops in the community and employers on that. Given the concern about numeracy skills in the adult population, financial capability is one way we want to really try and lift that, using that as an applied context to lift numeracy skills. And then 2 or 3 more points, and then I'll pause for any questions. That was a direct quote from one of the notes, teaching teachers how to teach us. So again, that's quite a valuable concept, and that was some of the work that I guess was funded 8 years ago when this literacy numeracy program first started, so it's interesting that it's come back up again. And that was a quote, again, directly from the notes, I believe. I understand the journey is part of the outcome, and that applies to not just for educators, but for learners themselves. And I guess for me and Kathryn, when we went through all these notes, one general impression I guess we had in terms of our future work is that it's about, most of the good practice to us, like it's already out there, it exists, but it's about how we scale up and emphasise the things that work. It's about, to use 3 kind of words, it's about us being enablers and also amplifying these things and also connecting the practice that's out there with the educators that would benefit from that good practice. So at least from our point of view is that our emphasis is, from now on, is not really about creating new things, it's actually using what already exists and actually connecting that more to the people who would need it.
So as David said, we did a review, and the review was focused on how we lift sector capability. And the focus of the review wasn't so much on what good practice is, because we heard about this the last few days. It was more about what do we need to do in our house at TEC to enable better practice. So it was very much what are the levers that we're using, what are the things that aren't working, that are shutting down things that we don't want to be shutting down. So it was that was kind of what we wanted out of it, was a really clear steer on what our next steps are for us, for our house. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the diagrams that the researchers presented back to us. So we picked researchers that have been around a long time. They knew the sector, they could jump right into the work, and it was really important to do that, as opposed to going to people that would come into this area and it would take them months to get their head around this sector, because there's a long history, it's complex, and lots has been done in the last 10 years. That's what I've found coming into this role after a year, is that there's been a really solid infrastructure that's been built. There's been a lot of capability building, and you could see it yesterday in how people are talking. It's not saying that we've got it right, but it's definitely a base that we want to leverage off now, 9-10 years later. So that's a diagram just to represent that we're looking at more us. So one of the key findings was that there is a lot going on, and this was described as stepping stones, their capability stepping stones. So it seems quite disjointed if you're sitting in the sector. There's a lot of different, there's tools, we've developed a range of tools, we've developed PD, we've had a National Centre for Numeracy and Literacy, we've got ARCL, which sits out of numeracy and literacy, but again, it's another place you can go for professional development. So it's all good stuff. It just seemed a bit disconnected, and I think the nodding in the room, I think that's, this was, yep, I wasn't surprised that we found that. The other thing that we were wanting to get our heads around was that the professional development's very supply driven. So we've kind of provided it and hope people will come to the door. So what we're hoping the review was going to look at was how do we change the incentives so it's actually people are rushing to get this, and organisations are going, actually, we need to get this PD. We need to ensure our staff have got the capability. So it's kind of trying to look at how do we flip this model. So this is around what are the current drivers and incentives. So we have, and the review talks about the compliance measures we've got. Now, compliance is not necessarily all bad. You know, there are compliance that matters, but it does seem that we've gone down quite a compliance route with numeracy and literacy that is inhibiting what we want. So really happy to see this in the report and how it's set out. And as you know, the assessment tool is a big part of that compliance. We've used it in that compliance realm. Going back to what the intent of the tool is, it's a teaching tool. So we're looking, and look, it's early days and it's a big ship to turn. There's lots of kind of arms to this, but looking at actually what the intent of the assessment tool is a teaching tool to help educators, and it's not numeracy and literacy. You know, it's got too big for what it is. So we're looking at how do we kind of move it more into a quality measure, and what are the other quality measures that we need to really look at what good provision looks like and what are the outcomes we want to achieve. So this is an example of shifting our compliance measures away from into more the quality, and this is around the expectation around qualifications. So actually, I'll get David to explain it. He's better at it.
What our ongoing expectation that all tertiary providers need to invest in the continual upskilling and professional development of their staff, their workforce, and we will be considering that in future funding decisions, but perhaps more as part of a range of things that contribute to quality education. And when we talk about investing in capability, I think and we now know that it's not just about requiring everyone to take up one particular qualification. It is, and certainly that move that we did, there were some positives, but there were some negatives with that. So one of the things that we're focusing on now is how to make it easier for tutors to start and continue on a journey of learning, because everyone starts at a different point in that journey. And we want to enable you and your colleagues to focus on that and focus on what's best for the learners. And so what we're going to talk about next is one of the sort of two things that we're thinking about that will hopefully address that in a really effective way.
So this one, the reviewers talked about actually L&N, it's quite a narrow focus. And for foundation learners, we're looking at a lot more outcomes in L&N. And this diagram is from the graduate profiles piece of work, which looks more holistically at a learner. So they're just, suggesting that this may be something that we need to be looking at, widening our lens. And, being here yesterday, that's probably a no-brainer for anyone in the room, because L&N is only a part of a whole lot of different. It's important, it's a real critical component, but there are, So that's another piece of work that we're going to be looking at with the sector, Okay, this is the diagram I was talking about. So this is, it's a recommendation from the review that we need to look at more of a capability pathway, or whatever we're going to call it. So it recognises that everyone comes in at different points, and the qualifications are a critical part, but also is professional development. There is other work that's been going on, bubbling away. We've got the session after us, and Elise is going to be talking about the work that the ACE sector has done around building a teaching framework. Stanley's also going to be talking about the higher level framework. So it's this came out of the Productivity Commission. So it's not a new idea. It's a good idea. So that's kind of real high level review. Look, it's just been finished. We've got a lot of work. We've got a lot of work to do. Really exciting work program. You guys have heard it first, really. We just, hot off the press. So, yeah, happy to have ongoing discussions about it. We're going to need it. It's not going to be simple. It's a bit of a ship to turn, but that's us, and this is another really exciting piece of work.
So kia ora anō tātou. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about Tū Mai e Te Akonga, which is the TEC's strategy for Māori learners for raising the achievement of Māori learners in tertiary education. It's basically made up of 4 different work streams. I'll be talking about the first 3, and then I'll pass it over to Katerina, who will talk about the last one, which is about embedding cultural competencies into teacher training, which is probably the most relevant to the kaupapa of this whānau. So in terms of the first work stream, we refer to this work stream as kind of our BAU, and it's internally focused, and the intention of that is to strengthen the TEC's focus on Māori learners in our core function. And so the things that we're looking at the moment starts kind of at our funding decisions, how we make funding decisions, and the kind of the impact that performance for Māori has on the decisions that we make in terms of our funding allocations and stuff like that. The next part is around monitoring. We really want to strengthen the way that we monitor performance for Māori learners. We have new information tools called Click, which give us a clearer understanding and a better view of performance for Māori learners by TEO. So we know how every TEO is performing, which we will then use to inform our decisions and the way that we engage with each of those TEOs. We want to get better value out of our investment manager engagements. So we want to provide more structure and consistency in the way that they engage with the sector on Māori performance, so that we get more value out of that. We get more intel, which we can use to inform the decisions that we make. We're also looking at what we do in terms of when we identify a tertiary provider that's not performing that well, what do we do about that? And we don't want to just take a punitive approach. That approach hasn't worked very well in the past. So we're looking at ways that we can support providers to do better for Māori. And that stuff is around kind of identifying what best practices in terms of good support programs for Māori learners, so that we're not just taking a punitive approach, we're taking kind of punitive as well as supportive as well.
One of the deliverables was Quality Educators Initiative. When I first came into the role, I said to them, first and foremost, are we saying that we don't have quality educators? And I didn't like the title, because it's not strength-based. And so my whakaaro there was that straight off, if I was a tutor, someone said to me, here's a Quality Educators Initiative, I'll be like straight off, so you're saying I'm not quality? You're saying that I haven't taught my people for the last 10, 20 years? So how are you going to give me quality? So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge everyone in this room that have worked with our people, have toiled with our people, Pacifica, and as Fire spoke, with many different various backgrounds. I come from a background where a socio-economic deprived area where we were all hard to reach. But I never knew that. I never knew that because they were all my whānau. And I didn't get a Pākehā in my class or anyone who was non-Māori until I was 16, which was a new piece for me. So when I look at cultural competency, you've heard the way in which we're going to promote it and how we're going to, in some ways, try to develop a framework. And that is a very important piece that we must never stop. We must always continue to fight for in terms of how we can ensure that our culture and other cultures are embedded into the teachings of up-and-coming tutors, teachers in the future. But how do we do that? I want to tell you a story. Just to back up everything that we're doing here. And the review in itself was very, how can I say, I read it on the plane, to be honest, comprehensive report. And what I thought was that this is timely for us. This is timely because cultural competency for us has to be authentic. I remember I worked with, I was appointed in a ministerial group, working with the Black Power and the Hmong mob, 6 presidents and all of their whānau. Huge learning curve for me. No longer was I supposedly the director, I was also the learner. And I remember bringing in, we had to do a te reo tikanga component, workshop, so to speak. And I brought in one of my mentors for many years, and I worked with him, and his name is Wānanga. And I worked with him at the University of Waikato. Now, he came in and I said, Mato, I need you to come in and do some stuff. Now, you're working with the presidents of the Black Power and the Hmong mob. So this isn't your academic group. He's a senior lecturer in linguistics, by the way, so he's very academic. And he said, oh, kei te pai, kei te pai. I said, no, Mato, you've got to come in and teach them without pen and paper. This is where they're at. They don't have literacy and numeracy. They're a different cup of tea. You can't come in with your, this is where this sits, and this is your verb, and this is all that sort of stuff. So it was hard case. So he says to me, oh, okay, well, let me think about that. So he came on the day, and this karawa, he must be heading into his 90s, and he put away his stuff, and the guys were there, both Black Power, both Hmong mob, and we were overlooking the sea at the marae, and he sang a mōtiatia, a very old mōtiatia. And he put up on the screen what it meant. And the mōtiatia was so old that you could feel it. And that authenticity of that mōtiatia brought them to tears. Now, the story goes like this. He had never taught anyone this mōtiatia. He's a native speaker, and his mother taught him this mōtiatia. And it spoke about a woman who in wartime lost her husband. And within that loss, she composed the mōtiatia around that pain. And it was the cutting, hai, and that pain, and the lyrics itself moved them to the point where these presidents were in tears. And he spoke about this and he said, I've never taught anyone this, I've never sang it. My mother taught me this, but I'm singing it to you today to acknowledge the pain, the hurt that you've experienced as Māori and as my whānau. So for them, that authenticity cannot be taught in a book, cannot be felt. And it cannot move people to love our reo and our tikanga from a framework, so to speak. So when we get back to looking at the cultural competency and not moving away from that authenticity, I had them come up to me afterwards and they said, we're teaching all of our members te reo and tikanga because of that pivotal moment. And those are things... and I said to him afterwards, and I said, Mato, I couldn't have wanted anything more. And if anything is moving, then what you did then. And for them, that created the relationship, the rapport. So anything he said, anything he taught, and this will be with tutors, had meaning and developed a relationship of respect. And so those are pieces that we need to capture in the cultural competency. Yes, it's a framework. Yes, it's something as a guideline, but it's a start. And it's something that we need to do in terms of developing deeper and more meaningful relationships. It's an interesting piece, and I think that the way in which we're getting back to the kaupapa at hand, how we structure that and how we ensure that's captured needs to be a diverse sector steering group. We've got some really capable people in this room that I want to acknowledge for all the work that they've done. And basically it's bringing those people together. And it will be a debate. It will definitely be a debate. I have no qualms in that, because the content itself, we are very passionate about those pieces. What are those pieces that we want teachers and tutors to have that will be a life learning, changing component to the way in which they engage? What makes them go over and above the content that's in the framework, that makes them feel I love my job. I love to see people develop. I love people understanding where they're from, their culture. And I also want to understand that myself.